because we can make those pleasures good, and we can surround ourselves with a community that reinforces the, quote, virtues of those pleasures, such as alcohol and hypersexuality and marijuana use or other drug use, that it's cool, it's all natural. And so we can very easily form a community or a tribe that reinforces our pursuit of pleasure. And this is really, I think, where the root of addiction comes from. I think the root of addiction is the justification for the addiction as a whole. And if you think it's kind of cool and neat and necessary when you start, and then you become addicted, then you're in trouble, right? And also the addiction tends to be not just the justification, but the society that's necessary to reinforce that justification. So when we have a mechanism to deliver unto us a society, which is acting against base.
What is a society? I think I commented on this in the last part. This is a notorious thing when you're listening to Stefan Molyneux. He starts out by, framing something. It's something that sounds like, decent philosophical approach to whatever topic. In this case, it's, I would say, metaphysics. And then there's empiricism and idealism and radical skepticism, I think he called it, or subjectivism, right? Though empiricism is not metaphysics, it's an approach to epistemology, which is sort of a huge problem in his understanding of what he's actually doing. But let's say that it fits the bill. And then he starts to talk about all sorts of things, bringing all sorts of, from left and right in all sorts of directions, right? Addictions and society and, as if all these things, when you're dealing with the foundations, right? As he apparently supposes to do here, right? You can't take anything for granted. You can't take anything as given, right? In fact, you can never take anything as given. You have to give it within your philosophy, in my opinion, right? Because if it's given, why is that given while something else is not given and you have to philosophize about it, right? Don't you have to philosophize about everything? Well, of course, I would say, right? And implicitly, he's saying all these things, society and addictions and whatever he is, tsunami about, right? Word salad. It's implicitly as if it's given, and you understand there might be a prior understanding, but that's just prejudice when you're working in metaphysics, right? So and this is a very, very common problem when people are philosophizing at these ends of things in philosophy, right? It doesn't occur to them that how they are arguing is taking certain aspects for granted, though it can't be granted when you're trying to establish that which enables you to grant it, right? So
impulses, right? So the base impulse of man is hyper procreation and physical aggression, and the base impulse of females is attention seeking and manipulation. We have to have a society we have to have a mechanism if we want a society, rather than just being a bunch of highly calculating and manipulative apes. If we want a society, we need a mechanism.
Who says we? But who are those we, right? If we, it presupposes things again, right? Another bad kind of philosophy. Who says we want that? And how can we want that which you haven't described what is, right? What is it? What is society? What color does it have? What sound does it have? Does it exist? Apparently not. So why would I want something that doesn't exist, right? Is it an idea in your head? Maybe, but I am not interested in pushing an idea in your head, right?
That gives us a reason to act against our base impulses. We have to have that mechanism. And we can see as a fall of religion, we have the fall of that self-restraint, right? How do we restrain ourselves? Animals don't generally restrain themselves. Of course, right? I mean, the lion...
Of course they do. Of course they do. Right? Gazelles usually don't, attack lions, right? They restrain themselves. They might not be aware of that. That's what they're doing, but they are restraining themselves from doing it, right? A dog might not eat something if it has a weird smell, so it's restraining itself from eating whatever it is it was or priorly supposed or thinking of eating, right? So it's restraining itself from eating because of some kind of qualia, right? So this is bullshit.
Lion doesn't think of the feelings of the mother of the zebra foal, right? So I'm going to try and limit myself to one analogy. I was about to say, the alligator doesn't care about that, but I think we all understand with one analogy, it's a smart audience, and you're well schooled in these things by now. See, and also me telling you that I'm making it shorter doesn't make it shorter, but I think it will in the long run. At least that's the hope of the goal. So religion is the mechanism by which we restrain our animal impulses so that we can actually have.
We restrain religion? Okay, so if you were sort of living alone on a deserted island, all of a sudden you will say, I have to restrain myself. Maybe you don't have to restrain yourself if it's on a deserted island, but you know what I mean, right? So if I have never been exposed to religion, I would not be able to restrain myself? What kind of stupid logic is that, right? This is sort of a sophist appeal to religion, and most notably Christianity. Christianity is destroying yourself and your will to live, basically, in order to make you behave in a certain way, right? It's fucking disgusting. I hate religion, any kind, with a vengeance, right?
A civilization. Because having moral disapproval is a way of punishing people for transgressing moral values.
Why are you talking about morality when you were dealing with aspects of metaphysics, right? So you're taking one giant fucking leap away from metaphysics over epistemology and knowledge and objectivity, going into some kind of weird sophist moralizing, or talking some kind of ethics that is sort of infused with religion without clarifying anything, right? This is the level of stupidity that he is able to tell you about in sort of a poisoning the well kind of approach to talking about other philosophers here, right?
Is not necessarily, can be, but not necessarily violent. If you are two men engaged in mortal combat, or any kind of combat really, I just think of boxing or duels or even fighting in a war, it's natural that the other person wants to kill you, the other man wants to kill you, and you want to kill the other man. What's that quote from Patton from the movie? The entire point of war is not for you to die for your country, but to make the other son of a bitch die for his. And so the mutual greed for survival and conquest and domination and murder, I guess, killing in this case, I mean, nobody's really disapproving of it. I mean, it's just that's the nature of the beast, right? The lion understands that the zebra doesn't want to be killed. The zebra understands that the lion wants to eat the lion. The lion wants to eat the zebra, right? That's.
You're talking about the three schools of thought and their true origin. You're talking about zebras and lions. I mean, it feels yet again as just, hey, I have to talk about I have created three schools of thought. Two are metaphysics, and one is the delineations of knowledge called empiricism. And I'm just sitting down on my chair here and just starting throwing word salad at you. And isn't it great, right? That's the sort of notion I get from this shit, right?
That's natural. That's understood. That's central to the equation. So we need a mechanism of restraint. We need a mechanism of restraint.
We? Speak for yourself. Right? Who are you to tell other people how to be, what to do, and how to think? Right? Who made you so special that you can tell everybody else they need to be restrained? Right? We have to have a mechanism to restrain you, right? What kind of megalomania is that? why don't you talk about your own restraint, right? How are you restraining yourself? And I might be inspired by it, right? But don't go and fucking tell me what I need, right? I can think for myself, thank you very much.
Has to be religion. Now, we need a mechanism of restraint for those who are raised badly. The mechanism of restraint for those who are raised well is empathy. I don't have a desire to steal. I don't have a desire to...
But steal is an interpretation. You can have desire for an interpretation, right? You don't want to be labeled as somebody who's stealing, right? But what does it entail to steal, right? You have never explained these terms. It is as if it's given, right? You are implicitly violating the problem that Hume was trying to point out, but apparently you're too stupid to understand these simple things that Hume pointed out 300 years ago, man, right? When you're saying, I don't want to steal, then you're saying implicitly that you can identify by empiricism, because that's the rule you're going for, right? You can know about stealing. That means it can be empirical. That means you can sense it. Now, if you sense something, there are 5 possibilities, right? At least one of these, right? Sight, sound, smell, and so on, right? What smell does stealing have, right? What color does stealing have, and so on? It has none of these. So you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, man, right? Why don't you grab your own tits and start to do some actual philosophy rather than just throwing around word salad, right? Even without a decent dressing, right?
Assault, I don't have a desire to murder. And that's the result not of being raised well, but of pursuing philosophy and being in love and loved and all that kind of stuff, and being a pretty good person. So we need...
Being a pretty good person, if I should say so myself. I'm a pretty good person, right? Yeah? Of course, I'm a pretty good person. That's why I can tell everybody they need to be restrained. If you have a good upbringing, and I'm going to decide what kind of upbringing is good and what is bad, because I'm the master of peaceful parenting, so I know what is good and bad in parenting, right? So I'm going to tell you whether or not you're going to be restrained. Those who got the good upbringing, they have empathy, of course, and they can control the other ones who had a bad upbringing. They need to be restrained. Fuck off, man.
Need a mechanism of restraint for those who have the violent impulses. And that mechanism of restraint has to be, well, we punish social, economic, and reproductive success if you don't conform. And that means that everybody has to have a shared moral standard and that they are willing to ostracize those who break it. Right? I mentioned this before, but many years ago I was lining up to get tickets to a show, and I thought I was in the lineup, but it turns out the lineup had formed behind me, and this was just a path by which people could walk through the lobby. And I remember it was a British couple behind me when I sort of slid in with my date to get these tickets. And behind me, he said, well, that's a bit much. Significant, strong disapproval. And so society needs a shared moral standard in order to threaten social, economic, and reproductive success to those who break the rules.
Who says that? Well, why does it have to be that way, right? What about 2 people breaking rules getting together then? They can have they don't need to ostracize each other. They can be agreeing on, they can reproduce in the sin of stealing, whatever, right? So all the stealing will band together and say, yeah, we don't care about the other. We're going to steal and we're not going to attack each other, right? How does that go about, right, Mr. Smartass, right?
You don't need to worry too much about people breaking the rules if they actually have empathy, unless their empathy has been really twisted and distorted through propaganda, but that's government's.
Why does empathy entail moral behavior, right? You haven't even defined what it means to be moral. then you will say it's adhering to a desired standard or something like that. Okay, then what is a desired standard, right? And then you could go on in this definition game without reaching any conclusion, right? So then it sort of is put in a gray zone by being lost in definitions. I mean, I'm still searching for somebody who can tell me what morality is, right? I have never heard any good explanation of what it means to be moral. Adhering to a rule. Okay, who gives the rules? Well, those with, empathy. But how do you know they have empathy? Well, but they behave in a certain... What is the behavior? No, shut up, right? You end in this kind of... They can't do it, right? Because they're not working from the correct point in their philosophy. They have to start with the basics. They have to start with the ground floor and work up slowly, step by step, axiom by axiom, definition by definition, and so on, right? So that all bases are covered. Hopefully, right? There might be something you have missed, right? You can never actually be perfectly sure. But at least you're doing something that is sort of based on some ground floor, rather than just starting throwing words around and thinking that you have solved the problem of the ages. Fuck off, man.
Schools and terrible media and a whole other series of things that solved in a free society as a whole. So God is the necessary mechanism for delivering the moral standards that allow people without empathy to restrain themselves, or in a sense, it's your best shot at having people without empathy.
He never mentioned anything about empathy in his book on morality, right? Or ethics. His ethical framework called UPB. Nothing was mentioned about God. In fact, it was deemed to be secular, right? So now it's not apparently secular anymore, and now it's all about empathy. Nothing of that was mentioned in his book, as far as I can remember, right? There might be some, implicit statement somewhere on page 89, whatever, right? But that's not what we're talking about. It should be, front and center in the book, right? You should be able to remember it very, very clearly. But apparently he just makes up stuff as he goes along, right? I mean, he's a parody of a philosopher. I mean, anybody in the right mind would not even attempt, to other than do what I do here, deconstruct it and point out how shittily bad it is, right? I mean, it's a precursor to the next philosopher in the row of philosopher he's going through in his History of Philosophers, and I might not know which one would be the next one. It might be Hume, if I'm not mistaken, but thereabout, right? He's talking about skepticism and so on. That might be Humean, right? A Humean approach. I don't like that Humean. That's like a Darwinian, right? Something like that. Okay. Let's dive in.
Restrain themselves. So, the need for God that people have, again, in the absence of a widely accepted standard, i.e.
I don't have any need for God. In fact, I would do what I can to try to remind people that appealing to some kind of ridiculous idea like that is stupid and dangerous, right? And it's merely there to control you rather than help you through life, I would say, right? It might inhibit you and destroy your ability to be a human being so much that you're actually folding into alignment with that desire to create control so we don't have people behaving badly. But you are receiving all the shit from this kind. You are adhering possibly to the system, but you are having all the bad sides of it. You are getting all the costs, right? Having low self-esteem, or living in anxiety for this God is going to attack you and is living everywhere and can see if you are masturbating or whatever, right? this kind of paranoia it creates, that's all on you, right? All the other people who can actually survive this, which is those kind of people who do not have empathy, right? Psychopaths and crazy people and useful idiots, right? They're going to control this system that he's so apparently fond of now, right? Fuck off with that shit, man.
UPB, the need that people have for God is the need for them to retain their civilization. Not just their culture and not just a cool place to go on Sunday.
So is civilization and society the same thing or what? What is a civilization then? What is that? Is it empirical? Please tell me what color it has then, right?
And so on, but literally to retain their civilization.
He was an empiricist, and he's talking, metaphysics here, right? Or at least there should be some metaphysical foundations for what the hell he's talking about. So whatever he talks about must have a color, right? In my opinion, you can't have any kind of empiricism without color, right? You could maybe discuss that, but at least one of the five senses, right? Then whatever you're referring to must either have a color or be an abstraction of something that has a color, right? Or a cognition, maybe like an elephant, right? When you're saying, I'm referring to elephant, okay, does elephant have a color? Yes, it's gray, right? Does it have a smell? Yes, it smells of elephant, right? And so on.
The restraint of the animal, that is the essence of civilization, right? This is back to Freud's book, Civilization and Its Discontents, that we all have an animal nature and civilization thwarts it. And he, of course, as an atheist and a victim of severe childhood sexual abuse that was unprocessed as a whole, and a guy who pushed cocaine upon friends and society, just a mess of a human being and so on, betrayed children fundamentally, thus leading to World War I in many ways. So,
all right.
The idea then, we have this animal nature.
I don't know much about that, but I guess could be an explanation, right? But I mean, maybe he was the only one trying to do these kinds of things, so might not blame him for World War One. If he hadn't been there, there would probably have been a World War One anyway, right?
Which is restrained and crushed by society. It's very sort of common. It comes to the hippie movement, go back to the land. All natural, man. It's all natural. This fetish worship of nature characterized by the environmental movement. The environmental movement, of course, is a fetish of nature worship. It's a nature cult, which means that they wish to fall back to the level of the mere mammal, of the mere animal, and that all the restraints that can be imposed by conceptual abstract reason is anathema to them, because it's the battle of the ape and the angel, right? The battle between the mammal and the abstract, between the body and the soul, so to speak. The mind-body dichotomy, right?
My God, he's rambling, man. Right? Why don't you get to the point? Right? It's like he has to inject his own, so you get the right approach. You're being groomed into having certain understandings before he tells you about these crazy philosophers who's out to destroy you somehow or another, right? But he is the right thinking, right? And he will tell you who the right thinkers are and the wrong thinkers, but he doesn't understand that there's a foundational flaw in his thinking, as I pointed out in the metaphysics discussion I had with him some months back on his show, which he basically just, muted me out of the discussion. So he could sort of say, hey, everybody's crazy, I'm right, go away, right? He lacks the ability to go where it really matters and present that in a rigid and functional manner, right? He's always doing this rambling, right? Nobody can. But if you're going to, hey, I think I'll upgrade my life with a bit of philosophy here, right? This is sort of all over the place, right? It's sort of pointing out various words in the dictionary, something like that. How could you possibly use this for anything, right? And it's a precursor for a discussion of other philosophers in history. What kind of bullshit could that possibly be? Or what could that be other than a bunch of shit, right? Ugh.
Mind wants abstractions and virtues, and the body wants food and sex. And finding a balance, because you can't, I mean, you can, if you want, in the pure Platonic form, say that the only virtues, the only good in life exists away from the body. You can try that, but that is to say that the body is evil, and only the soul or the abstract virtues are good. That's not good. I mean, that's not valid. That's not true. The soul is a beautiful thing.
That's good. That's not valid. That's not true. Why? It's this. I'm again, this word salad. He's just throwing words at it. You know, if I throw enough of these kinds of words at it, it's sort of given. Now I proved it, right? Good, valid, and true, and you know, what? Oh man, really, really bad philosophy, man.
Thing that supports the life of the mind. It really enables and makes possible the life of the mind. So, to deny the body and its pleasures is wrong, and not practical.
It's wrong, but what do you mean it's wrong, right? Define wrong. Right? You're just throwing around words without definition. These are, you know, notorious words that people are looking for definitions. And nobody seems to have been able to come up with a good definition of what these words entail. At least not in the moral sense. You know, when you're good and evil, right? And then you potentially may be using good in another context here. So what is the new definition of the use of the word, right?
And not sustainable. And it abandons the taming of the body. It abandons that entire battlefield. And then you get all of the cultural representations that satisfying the body is the thing, right? I mean, this is an Andrew Tate thing, right? Mating displays, wealth displays, domination, dominance, and all of that, right? So there was a desperate need to keep God, because to keep God in the absence of UPB is to keep civilization itself, to have a mechanism by which self-restraint can be enforced for those who lack self-restraint.
Self-restraint, that's you doing the... You can't say self-restraint is enforced. Because if it's self-restraint, it is the actual self that is restraining itself. Can you enforce a self-restraint? What kind of enforcement are you talking about, right? Enforcing self-restraint, you can force restraint. You can force people to restrain themselves, but that is not self-restraint. That is you coming from the outside, doing some kind of influence, right? Without getting into further description of what that influence might be, in order to make them restrain themselves. But that is the opposite, or the let's say the opposite of self-restraint, because self-restraint is when you decide to restrain yourself, right? Oh man, he's bad.
Now,
and it all, you know, between the lines, right? Always read between the lines when these kind of shitty philosophers present something, right? It's enforcing, right? Force is a part of that word, right? It's very close to threatening people with some kind of violence, right? In order to make them do what you want them to do, right? Because you have seen the light, this is how you should behave, because magic UPB, right?
if we look at these three, and you could make the case, though I won't at the moment because the mechanisms are so different, you could make the case that Platonic idealism and radical subjectivism, which is that nothing exists unless you're looking at it, you could make the case that these are two sides of the same coin. Let's keep them separate for the moment. The question is, well, why would people believe these things?
Why don't you go into some kind of... their true origins. Okay, so you're going into some psychology as the origin. It's not because people can philosophize, apparently. Oh, so this is how it's supposed to be framed and understood. The three schools of thought and their true origin, right? One of them is empiricism, and these are philosophically, right? The others are crazy people who have bad childhoods and they need to be restrained, right? Oh my God, he's an idiot, man. Oh man, right? Oh.
Why would people believe these things? Well, I'm going to put forward a conjecture, a hypothesis, and we can see how it plays out as we move forward in the series.
What's the difference between a conjecture and a hypothesis? I would love a definition or definitions of these terms, right? I would love that. Just sometimes, please give me a fucking straight up definition, right?
And the conjecture goes something like this. All comes back to childhood, very early childhood.
So all philosophy comes back to childhood, right? It's not just those that you don't like that is coming back to childhood. It might also be your philosophy, right? I should keep that in mind, I would say.
Experiences, very early childhood experiences. So, let's say that your parents are present and they care for you and they love you when you're a baby, a toddler. And they're not perfect, there's no such thing, but they're good parents. They're good parents. They take pleasure in your company, they teach you things, they instruct you, they lead you to the world, right? When my daughter was a baby, she would always want to be held, but being held wasn't just staring into my eyes. She would want to be held. This is before she could even walk. She'd want to be held, and then she would reach for various things around the room. Books, pictures, balls, cutlery, and so on. She would reach, and she would want to explore these things. So she would reach to be picked up, and then she would reach for things, and she would use me as a mechanism by which to explore the world. So I led her to the world. I was the portal through which she went through and was able to explore the world. She did that because she trusted me, she was secure in my arms, she knew that I wasn't going to lead her to anything dangerous, and that I would share my knowledge with her. So it was a form of love and mutual happiness through the exploration of the world. And she's retained all of that empiricism, which is your parents are not there to just stare at you. Your parents are not just there to cuddle you, and those things are important and good. But your parents are there to lead you to the world, to have you validate and trust your senses so that you can act effectively in reality. So that's the birth of an empirical child. Now, I will at some point talk about how
An empirical child? I guess that you might be more prone to selecting empiricism as a source of knowledge or a delineation of where you can get knowledge. I'll let this pass.
I came to empiricism in a more formal manner, in an instinctual manner than a more formal manner, but let's just focus on the general categories. So then we have the idealists. Now, of course, the Platonic idealists, they have that the abstractions are infinitely superior to the manifestations.
What does infinitely superior mean rather than superior? It's just these terms, right? Now and again, okay, yeah, it can be, one slips through, right? But it's again this compounding of words. I don't like that. Just stick to the simplicity of saying they're superior. Why? What is infinitely superior? I don't know what infinitely superior is, right?
That the categories are more important than the content.
I don't even know what superiority is with concepts, right?
That there's a perfect table out there in the abstract universe that you inhabited before you were born, and you recognize individual tables based upon this abstract perfect table, and the truth is in the abstractions. The truth, the value, the reality is in the abstractions, not...
Well, how did you get to understand there's a table? Now, this reeks of his bad metaphysics, right? Because what he's basically implicitly saying here, he has access directly to some external world, a world that is external to his experience. Now, how the fuck does he square that circle, right? If he needs to have empiricism, which is he needs to have senses in order to have knowledge, then is that world out there beyond knowledge or better than knowledge? Because if it needs to come through his senses, then it needs to be in the mind in order for him to have anything to go with, right? Otherwise, he knows of what is out there before it's empirical. How can he not see the stupidity of this man, right? And if he, in some weird, incredible way, has access to this perfect insight to a world outside his experiences, why the hell does he need experiences that could potentially be erroneous? Right? That doesn't work in evolution. And if you are a being that is a subset of a larger thing, then the only possible way for you to have any insight into what is going on beyond that being is some kind of representation within your mind. And then from that follows, that has always been the only thing you have access to. You're just treating it implicitly, axiomatically, as if it is the same as the outside, right? If he does not get this, right? If he can wrap his head around this without thinking that people are out to get him, well, the only thing he's going to be remembered for in 500 years is his crappy philosophy and his lack of ability to understand even the simplest, a glaring error in the foundations of his philosophy, even when people fucking throw it in his face, right? That's not the kind of philosopher who's going to be remembered in the future. I bet you that.
Not in the empirical manifestations. Well, how does that come about? Why would anyone believe that? It was a fundamental question. Like, why do people believe crazy things?
Why is it crazy? What is crazy? No, what is crazy is believing that you have a one-to-one. Either you have direct access to an external world outside your being in some magical way, or you have a one-to-one representation of that world inside your mind. That's fucking crazy, right? That's where the craziness is, if there's any craziness here.
Why do people believe crazy things? Which they would never accept in any other context, right? If you order, like, let's say you point at a picture of a salmon in a restaurant. I got pictures on the menu. You point at a picture of a salmon, or just
I would bet that the purpose of this kind of preliminary, grooming of the listeners into have a preconceived ideas whether or not about these kinds of philosophies that he's apparently going to elaborate on when he gets to the next philosophers here, right? Is to make sure that his listeners don't think for themselves, right? That they have a preconceived idea of how this should be understood. So when he presents it, they already know what to think, right? It's this cultish mentality. You're not allowed to think for yourself. I need to tell you before I, illuminate you on these philosophies and philosophers that there's something wrong with their mind, that they had a bad childhood, this kind of bullshit, right? But I'm, for one, not buying it, right?
The word. Say, I'll take that, right? And then they bring you a picture of a salmon. You'd be like, no, but I don't want the representation. I want the thing itself. No, but the reputation is superior to the thing itself. It's like, I can't eat this. No. But the abstraction, the concept, right? They bring you...
This is all crap. This is not what they're dealing with when they're doing idealism or radical skepticism, or whatever the term he uses is, right? It's because he doesn't understand right? They're not talking about a cardboard cutout of a salmon. They're talking about that salmon you are actually referring to is not the actual salmon. And the actual, whatever it is, you do not have access to, right? That's the difference. You don't understand this. I mean, it's because you don't understand it that you have to go into all this kind of pocket psychologizing about, you have to have the reason why they're doing. I can't explain it from a philosophical standpoint, so I have to give you some explanation that is based on they had bad childhood or something like that. No, it's you who do not get the core problem that they're trying to deal with, right? You do not get it, man, right?
The word salmon in big type, or they bring you a picture of a salmon, or they bring you the definition of a salmon. They say, no. The concept is more important than the instance. This is
A picture of a salmon is not a concept, right? A concept is a mental cognition. It's a part of cognition. When you are, having experiences, colors, sound, and all of a sudden the mind says salmon, right? But if a picture of a salmon is not a concept. That's an object, right? That would be objectified or cognized as a photograph or whatever it is, right? For instance, that pictures a salmon, right? That's not a concept, right? Oh, man.
truth of salmonness. Well, if you cared more for categories, infinitely more for categories than instances, you would die. Because if you were thirsty...
Now, when it comes to this Platonic thing, right? Now, I might be quite more on board with Plato and Socrates in these corners of the philosophy than I might have been prior, right? Because if we are trying to establish knowledge and what it means to be true, right? I would say that you need knowledge in order to get to truth. You can't get to... It makes no sense to say whatever X is true if it's not knowledge, right? There might be, actually necessary to have new words to describe these aspects. Something can be an insight, but without being true. Something can be an insight without being knowledge. It's some kind of different kind of insight than knowledge, because knowledge has to be a particular kind of insight. I'm using the term insight in lack of a better term, right? So if it's not that kind of insight, it's something different. So it's screwing with the terms and just saying everything. Sort of, this is knowledge and that is knowledge and colors are knowledge and concepts are knowledge and science is knowledge, and it's some knowledge everywhere, right? But there are different kinds of categories, so it doesn't make sense to call it all knowledge, right? It needs to be differentiated more. So if we are, in a way, going for knowledge and truth, right? If that is necessary, I'm not saying it necessarily necessary, but I would say it would be a good idea, because that's what people refer to when they're pointing and saying, I know that over there, right? So if you can cognize something using concepts, right? Let's say that Stefan Molyneux understood the problem that he doesn't understand, right? That you need your concepts in order to have any coherent reference within your experiences, right? Rather than say there's a lot of colors and sound and so on, then the mind sort of picks out something and says, that elephant, right? Elephant. Deal with it, right? So when you're saying elephant, you're referring to the concept. You're not necessarily referring to that object that sort of enabled the cognition of elephant, right? You are referring to elephant, right? You can say elephant, 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 elephant. You're on the savannah in Africa, right? You can call them all elephant, even though they're all different, right? So what are you referring to? You're actually not referring to the actual object. You're saying elephant by referring to something that is the same within it, right? Which is the concept, the cognition. Now, where do these cognitions come from, right? That might be what Plato was trying to get at. He might have got it wrong, right? But at least he understood there was something going on here, right? Now, it might be an interpretation whether or not he thought that concepts were more important than the actual instance, but there is something to it, right? If you're going around on the African savannah and saying elephant, 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 right? You are implicitly, you could say, it's a bit of a stretch maybe, but you could say it's more important that it's an elephant than it is that particular elephant, right? That particular instance of whatever it is that created that elephant, or referred or ignited that already established cognition called elephant, right? So then the next question might be, it's more important that you have the cognition than you have the colors, right? Apparently, the colors and the sounds and so on are there in order for you to be able to cognize. That might point in the direction that the cognitions are more important than the actual colors, right? If it's a brown elephant or a red elephant or a gray or a green elephant, doesn't matter as much as if it's an elephant or not, right? Does it matter whether it's a light brown or a gray brown or a red brown saber-toothed tiger? No. What matters is it's a saber-toothed tiger, and that's a reference to the concept, not the instance, right? So the concepts are more important. That's what you're going for, right? When you're going down the grocery store, you're not saying I should have 3 red ones, 2 green ones, 1 light blue and 1 dark blue, and then I'm satisfied. No, you're going for apples, bananas, meat, potatoes, rice, right? Concepts. The concepts is what you're buying. You're not buying colors and sounds and so on, right? They follow from, because you must grab some instances in order to get that concept with you, but it's the concept you're looking for, right? Isn't it fair to say the concepts are more important than the actual instances or the base qualia the concepts have been cognized from? I would say so, right?
You would write the word water on a piece of paper and chew it and swallow it. Hopefully rice paper.
The bullshit. He's screwing with the understanding. He doesn't understand the basics here. He's simply completely oblivious to this foundational question of what it means, the difference between experiences and any kind of reference to an external world, right? He doesn't get it. He's apparently too pig-headed in order to get there, right?
Right. And you would die within a couple of days if you cared for the abstractions more than the instances. So people only survive by working on instances, not abstractions. And the abstractions, of course, are wonderful and useful and powerful tools. But people survive on the instances, not the abstractions. So why on earth would they say that the abstractions are more important than the instances when they're only alive because they process instances rather than abstractions? Things rather than definitions. Why would people believe these things which go so fundamentally at odds with everything that makes and keeps them alive? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they had bad parents who insisted on loyalty based not upon their empirical actions, but upon the category called parents. Oh,
really?
You feel that one?
Really?
Shaking your
really?
spine. It should.
Holy shit.
Or
they are just so smart that they can see this implicit, built-in problem in materialism, right? They can see there's a problem, there's a contradiction. Maybe it's just that. Maybe they had bad parents, but they might also be able to do philosophy, right? Fucking idiot, man.
And getting goosebumps, you need to listen to this again. Because if you have bad parents who demand obedience and loyalty based upon the category called parents, then they're saying that the greatest value, the highest value, the essential value is in the category, not the actions. The abstraction, the concept of parents is more important.
He's doing some kind of Freudian shit, right? There has to be a Freudian explanation for these weirdos who simply don't accept that I have direct access to the world out there, right? I must be the world. He must be the world. We are just little, existences in his world. And if he's not the world, then how does he experience that external world directly? I mean, how the hell does that work, man, right? It's kind of incredible because he keeps coming back to this, and maybe he should see that as a pointer that there's something subconsciously in him that is keep trying to pound at him from the back door, so to say, saying, wake up, idiot, man, right? You haven't got it. You haven't got it, right? But he keeps his Freudian false self is self-restraining his philosophy, right? So he will never get there, right? Maybe you should listen a bit to his subconscious, maybe.
And then the empirical behavior that they actually inflict. Your father beats you. Your mother screams at you. They neglect you. And you rebel. You say, why? Why should I obey you? Because I'm your father. That's your mother. Don't talk to a mother that way.
So, father is a category. Okay, so he referred to civilization and morality and society and all this. Are these not categories? They're not instances, are they? Right? So, he's basically using the same kind of stupid argumentation as saying parent or mother and father and so on, right? Father is not an entity, it's a responsibility, I would say, right? It's a part of an agreement. If we have children together, you're the mother, I'm the father, you have these, and I'm not saying what they are, but we have these responsibilities we share between us, right? I would say it doesn't necessarily have to be there, but then it's a stupid engagement, right? You don't engage in children creation unless you have a very clear understanding of where that's going. And you can't have a fucking government breathing you in the neck, potentially jumping in at any given moment, enabling destruction of this family, right? At this point in time, I'm close to saying, if anybody asks me whether or not they should start a family or not, I would say, be very careful. I would consider not doing it, right? Because nothing is sacred anymore, right? When it comes to family or fatherhood in particular, you are very likely to be going to be screwed over, right? Look like I haven't, a halo or something like that. Look at that. It looks like, I don't know, what does it look like? A monk helmet, or what? Now I'm a Jew. Just kidding.
We are your parents. So you do what we say. Right? So they're not making appeals to your reason. They're not making appeals to your empathy. They're not making appeals to your reciprocal affections. They are saying that you must obey a category called parents. You must sacrifice yourself for what? King Bob? No, not King Bob. Or not Bob, a guy.
But God is not a category. God is everywhere and everything, right? It's like, oh man, get it away from me, right? I'd rather have stupid parents who doesn't inflict religion on me than having nice parents inflicting religion on me, right?
With a funny metal cap on. No. You don't sacrifice yourself for Bob. You sacrifice yourself for your country. The abstraction, the concept.
The concept of civilization. And if we want a society, which is an abstraction, but in 5 minutes I'm going to rail against abstractions, right? I mean, how does this even exist side by side in his head, right? How can he be so... The philosophies are, what's it called? They're scurrying at each other, right? I'm looking for a word. It doesn't matter. It's like it's a cognitive philosophical cognitive dissonance or something like that. It's a philosophical dissonance. It's not cognitive dissonance, right? It's like, well, how does this work for you, right? Don't you know when something is an abstraction or not, right? Or categories or whatever term he uses, right? Apparently not, while he claims to be an empiricist, man, right? Oh.
The concept is infinitely superior to the instance. The king, which is a concept, is infinitely superior to the Bob.
The philosopher is infinitely superior to all the plebs, right? Yes, I'm a philosopher. When you send money to me, you are supporting philosophy. I'm basically here as a representative of philosophy. And all the other philosophers are stupid. They had bad childhoods, so you should only listen to me and give me money, right? Because then you're... Fuck off, man.
You don't obey the priest, you obey God. So all the social mechanisms of enforcement, primarily parents, your family is everything. You do everything for family. Well, you guys aren't treating me that well. No, but family is everything. You must obey your parents. Honor their mother and their father. Not what they do, but the category, the concept, the abstraction. That's what you must obey. That's the most important thing. And of course, being bullied by concepts, by abstractions, or respect being demanded by a concept rather than an individual who acts. A brother-in-law who cheats you out of $1,000. You say, you must forgive him. He's family. The moral category, the direct action of theft and stealing. Well, that doesn't matter. What matters is the abstraction called the family. Now, I get that abstraction covers genetic things, but that's why I said brother-in-law, right? Although, if they have kids, they're part yours as well, of course.
Are we still talking about metaphysics here? Or what the hell is he talking? Is this rambly thing, right? This is all over the place, right? Okay, I think we'll stop here and getting close to the 1 hour mark, right? I want to keep it under 1 hour. And we will keep going in the next part. I think it's going to be maybe a couple of parts more before we are through with this. And I am kind of not looking forward to whatever might happen beyond this, but I might be interested in if he's doing Hume, right? And how he's going to misrepresent what Hume was saying. So I would deconstruct for sure, right? Okay. Please share, like, and subscribe. Consider donation and the board link below. Otherwise, see you in the next one. Bye-bye.